Tom was a quiet man who loved simple things. He enjoyed early mornings with a cup of tea, the sound of birds in his small backyard, and the comfort of his old armchair. For many years, his little house had been his safe place. It was where he raised his children and where every corner held a memory. But as time passed, the house began to feel empty. His daughter lived in another city, his grandson was growing fast, and Tom wanted to spend more time with them. So one spring morning, Tom decided it was time to move. He had sold the house after months of planning, and the new owners were ready to come in the following week. His boxes were neatly packed and labeled. The truck was scheduled to arrive, and Tom felt a mixture of sadness and excitement. It was hard to say goodbye to a place full of memories, but he also looked forward to being close to his family. There was, however, one person who never made things easy. Her name was Karen. She was the president of the Neighborhood Homeowners Association, and she believed every person in the community had to follow her rules. Karen was not a bad person in the sense of doing harm, but she loved control. She wanted to know when people painted their fences, trimmed their trees, or even parked their cars on the street. Most neighbors tried to ignore her, but Tom often found himself at the center of her attention because he refused to argue with her. He would simply smile and go on with his life, and that made Karen even more determined to make her point. On the morning of the move, Tom carried the first box to his front porch. The sun was shining, the air was fresh, and he felt light in spirit. But as he placed the box down, he saw Karen walking toward his house with her usual clipboard in hand. She wore a serious look, as if she were on official duty. Tom knew at once that his peaceful morning was about to change. "Good morning, Tom," Karen said, though her tone did not sound friendly. She looked at the boxes stacked neatly in the living room. "I see you are moving today." Tom nodded politely. "Yes, it is time. My daughter is waiting for me, and I want to be near my grandson. I have already sold the house." Karen frowned. "You cannot just move without permission. The association has rules about this. You must fill out the exit form, submit it to me, and wait for approval." Tom blinked in surprise. "Approval to move out of my own house? Karen, I have already signed the papers. The new family is moving in next week. I am not asking permission. I am simply leaving." Karen pressed her lips together and tapped her pen against the clipboard. "The rules are clear. We need to check the house, make sure you have followed all the guidelines, and only then can you leave. Otherwise, you are breaking the agreement with the community." Tom gave a small smile. "I have always paid my dues, kept my yard tidy, and respected the community. I think I have done my part. This house belongs to me, and now it belongs to the new family. I am not breaking any rule that matters." Karen did not like his calm tone. She was used to people either giving in or arguing with her. Tom did neither. He simply spoke kindly and stood firm. That frustrated her even more. "I am warning you, Tom," she said. "If you move without my permission, there will be consequences." Tom picked up another box and placed it on the porch. "Karen, thank you for your concern, but I will continue with my move. I have no intention of breaking the law, and I know the law does not require your signature for me to live my life." Karen's eyes narrowed. She turned quickly and marched back toward her house, muttering under her breath. Tom sighed with relief. He hoped that would be the end of it, but a small voice inside told him that Karen was not done. As the morning went on, the moving truck arrived. Two young men stepped out and began helping Tom load the heavy furniture. Tom felt thankful for their energy. They laughed, carried boxes with ease, and made the process smooth. Every so often, neighbors peeked from their windows or waved goodbye, wishing Tom well on his new journey. Many of them knew about Karen's strict ways, and they admired Tom for never letting her trouble him. By afternoon, most of the house was empty. Tom stood in the living room and looked at the bare walls. Memories flashed in his mind: his children running through the hallway, birthday parties in the dining room, evenings spent reading by the lamp. He felt a little ache in his heart, but also a warmth, knowing he was carrying those memories with him. Just then, Karen reappeared. This time she looked even more determined. She carried her phone in her hand. "Tom, I have given you every chance. You refused to listen. I am going to call the authorities. You cannot move until this is resolved." Tom placed the last box near the door and looked at her calmly. "Karen, please think carefully. I am not doing anything wrong. Calling the police will not change the fact that I have the right to move. Do not waste their time." But Karen did not listen. She stepped aside, dialed the number, and began speaking loudly as if she were reporting a crime. The movers exchanged confused glances. Neighbors quietly gathered at their windows again, curious about what would happen next. Tom remained steady. He knew the truth, and he also knew something Karen did not. His son Mark was coming that evening to help with the final paperwork and the long drive. Mark was not just any son. He worked for the FBI. As Karen continued with her dramatic phone call, Tom felt a quiet strength rise inside him. He had no reason to fear. This was just the beginning of a day that would test patience and reveal truths Karen was not prepared to face. And so, the moving day, which started with hope and sunshine, turned into a stage where calmness and control would be tested against stubbornness and pride. The moving truck was half loaded when Tom noticed a police car slowly turning onto the street. Its lights were not flashing, and the siren was silent, but the sight still drew the attention of every neighbor. Curtains shifted, blinds lifted, and curious eyes peeked out from every house on the block. Children who had been riding bicycles stopped on the sidewalk and stared. Karen stood tall on her front lawn, her phone still in her hand, with a satisfied look on her face. She believed she had finally shown Tom that no one could ignore her rules. She waved to the officers as they parked near the curb, pointing directly at Tom's house as if she had uncovered a major crime. Tom stayed calm. He placed another box gently in the truck and waited. The two officers stepped out of the car. They were young, polite, and slightly puzzled. From their expressions, it was clear they were not sure why they had been called. "Good afternoon, sir," one officer said as he approached Tom. "We received a call about some kind of dispute. Is everything all right here?" Before Tom could reply, Karen hurried forward, her clipboard clutched tightly in her arms. "Officers, thank goodness you are here. This man is trying to move out of the neighborhood without permission. According to the Homeowners Association guidelines, he must file an exit form and wait for approval before leaving. He has refused to cooperate." The officers exchanged quick glances. One of them bit back a small smile. "Ma'am, just to be clear, you called us because your neighbor is moving." Karen nodded firmly. "That is correct. He cannot leave until I sign the paperwork. It is against the rules." Tom folded his arms gently and spoke in his usual calm voice. "Officers, I have sold this house. I am moving closer to my family. I have broken no law. I respect the community, but the decision to move is mine alone. The officer closest to him nodded slowly. Yes, sir, you are correct. As long as you have sold your home legally and there are no outstanding legal issues, you are free to move. Karen gasped. But you do not understand. I am the president of the Homeowners Association. My permission is required. Without my approval, the move is invalid. The second officer looked at her kindly. Ma'am, I understand that you may have community rules, but those rules are not the same as laws. We enforce the law, not HOA paperwork. Your neighbor has every right to move without your approval. Karen's face turned red, but she refused to give up. She pointed at the moving truck. What about the noise? What about the disruption to the community? Surely that counts as a violation. The first officer sighed softly. Ma'am, moving trucks are normal. People move every day. Unless there is illegal activity, this is not a police matter. Tom tried to end the conversation peacefully. Officers, thank you for your time. I respect your service. I assure you I am simply moving my belongings. There is no problem here. The officers nodded and started back toward their car. But Karen hurried after them, still arguing. You cannot just leave. You must make him stop. You must make him follow my rules. The officers kept calm, but it was clear they were growing tired of the situation. One turned back and said firmly, Ma'am, please understand. You cannot call us for personal disagreements. False or unnecessary reports waste resources. We will not be returning for this matter. Please resolve it privately. They returned to their car, leaving Karen standing in the middle of the street. Neighbors who had been watching whispered quietly. Some shook their heads, others chuckled under their breath. Karen realized her victory had slipped away. Tom, however, remained gentle. He lifted another box and placed it in the truck. His mind was steady, but he also knew Karen was not finished. He could see it in her eyes. She felt embarrassed, and embarrassed people often doubled their efforts to regain control. Later that afternoon, Tom's son Mark arrived. He parked his car in the driveway and waved warmly. Tom's face lit up with pride. Mark carried himself with quiet confidence. He wore no uniform, but his calm presence made him stand out. Dad, Mark said as he hugged his father, how is everything going? Tom chuckled. The move is going well, but there has been some drama. Karen called the police, insisting I cannot move without her permission. Mark raised his eyebrows. She called the police because you are moving. Tom nodded. Yes. Thankfully, the officers handled it politely and left. But I believe Karen is not done yet. Mark placed a reassuring hand on his father's shoulder. Do not worry. You have done nothing wrong. If she causes more trouble, I will handle it. Karen noticed Mark's arrival from across the street. She did not know who he was, but she could sense his importance. She quickly returned to her house, but her curtains shifted every few minutes as she watched carefully. As evening approached, Tom and Mark shared a meal on the porch. The moving truck was nearly full. The air was calm again, yet there was a quiet tension in the neighborhood. Everyone wondered if Karen would make another move. And indeed, she was inside her house at that very moment, making notes on her clipboard and drafting a long message for the HOA board. She was not ready to surrender. In her mind, she was defending order, even if no one else agreed. Tom sipped his tea and looked at his son. I just want peace. I want to leave quietly and start fresh near the family. But Karen will not let go. Mark smiled gently. Sometimes peace requires patience, Dad. Do not worry. Tomorrow will show her that her power has limits. As the sun set, the street grew quiet. The neighbors closed their blinds, the children returned inside, and the moving truck stood ready for the final load in the morning. But under that calm surface, everyone sensed that the story was not finished. The confrontation had only just begun, and Karen was already planning her next step. The night passed quietly, though the air in the neighborhood felt heavy with tension. Tom slept lightly, waking often to check on the boxes stacked in the living room. His son Mark, who had stayed over to help with the final tasks, remained calm. He read a book on the couch, unbothered by the whispers of trouble that still lingered from the day before. At sunrise, Tom stepped outside with his morning tea. The air was cool, and the streets were quiet, except for the faint sound of a lawn sprinkler down the road. He enjoyed these peaceful moments, knowing soon he would leave this place behind. But his peace did not last long. Across the street, Karen's curtains moved. Within minutes, she stepped out, once again holding her clipboard and her phone. She walked with determination, as if the events of yesterday had not humbled her at all. Tom sighed softly and braced himself. "Good morning, Tom," Karen said, though her voice was sharp. "I have reviewed the situation overnight, and I must insist that you cannot move today. I have prepared a formal complaint to the HOA board. Until it is resolved, your move should be delayed." Tom remained patient. "Karen, I respect your role, but I cannot delay. The truck is scheduled. The new family is expecting to move in. My decision is final." Karen crossed her arms. "Then you leave me no choice. Yesterday the officers did not take this seriously. Today I will make sure the authorities understand. I will call again, and this time I will explain that you are refusing to comply with community regulations. They will have to take action." Tom shook his head slowly. "Karen, please think carefully. Calling the police again will not change anything. You will only waste their time." But Karen was already dialing. She turned away, speaking quickly into the phone. Her tone was serious, her words urgent, though Tom knew she was stretching the truth. Neighbors began to peek from their windows again. Some shook their heads. Others watched with quiet amusement, as if they were watching a play unfold right outside their homes. Mark walked out to join his father. His presence brought a different energy. He looked calm but carried an air of authority that was hard to ignore. He listened as Karen spoke on the phone, her voice rising with every sentence. When she hung up, she turned to face them. "The officers are on their way," she declared. "This time they will not ignore me." Tom sighed, but Mark spoke for the first time. His voice was calm, steady, and clear. "Ma'am, may I ask why you think you have the power to stop this move?" Karen blinked, surprised by his directness. "Because I am the HOA president. Rules are rules, and without my approval, no one is allowed to leave." Mark tilted his head slightly. "Rules in a community are not laws. Police enforce laws, not association preferences. By making repeated calls about matters that are not crimes, you are misusing emergency resources. That is very serious." Karen frowned. "And who exactly are you to tell me that?" Before Mark could answer, the sound of the approaching police car filled the street once again. This time the lights flashed, though still without siren. The officers parked at the curb, stepping out with a mixture of confusion and frustration. Again, one of them muttered under his breath, Karen hurried to them. "Officers, you must listen. This man is refusing to follow the HOA rules. He is defying my authority. You must make him stop until we resolve the paperwork." The officers looked at Tom, then at Mark, who stepped forward. His calm expression never wavered. He pulled out his identification and showed it to the officers. "My name is Mark," he said. "I am a special agent with the FBI. My father is doing nothing wrong. He has sold his house legally. He has every right to move. I also want to point out that repeated false reports waste valuable resources that could be needed elsewhere. This is no longer a misunderstanding. It is becoming a pattern." The officers studied the badge carefully and nodded with respect. Their posture changed at once. "Understood, Agent," one of them said. "Thank you for clarifying." Karen's confident expression crumbled. "What do you mean, FBI? You cannot be serious. He is just moving boxes." Mark looked at her directly. "Yes, my father is just moving boxes. And that is exactly the point. He is a citizen following the law. But you are repeatedly calling officers to interfere with his basic rights. That is not leadership. That is harassment. If this continues, there will be consequences beyond an HOA complaint." The words hung in the air like a heavy stone. Karen opened her mouth to argue, but no words came out. The officers turned to her and spoke firmly. "Ma'am, this is the second time in 2 days we have been called here for no valid reason. If we are called again for the same matter, there will be penalties for misuse of emergency services. We strongly advise you to stop." Karen's face turned red. She clutched her clipboard as if it were a shield, but she said nothing. Tom, standing beside his son, felt a wave of relief. For the first time, Karen looked uncertain. The balance of control had shifted. The officers thanked Mark, nodded at Tom, and returned to their car. They drove away, leaving a silence that spread across the street. Neighbors who had been watching quickly pulled back their curtains, whispering in hushed voices. Mark turned to his father. "It is settled for now. She will think twice before trying again." Tom gave a gentle smile. "Thank you, son. I did not want trouble, but I am grateful you are here." Karen retreated to her house without another word. She closed her door quickly, but everyone knew she was still watching. She had lost this round, but whether she would accept it was uncertain. As the day continued, Tom and Mark worked together to finish loading the truck. The sun climbed high, the neighbors returned to their daily routines, and for the first time in days, Tom felt hopeful. He could almost see the road ahead leading to his daughter's home, where laughter and family awaited. But deep inside, he knew Karen was not finished. She had tasted defeat, and people like her rarely accepted it quietly. The real test was yet to come. The sun rose brightly on the third day of the move. Birds sang from the trees, and the air carried the scent of fresh grass. Tom felt lighter as he looked at the nearly empty house. Only a few pieces of furniture remained inside, and by afternoon everything would be packed. His heart filled with hope, knowing soon he would be on his way to a new beginning with his family. But across the street, behind closed curtains, Karen was awake too. She had hardly slept. The events of the last 2 days replayed in her mind again and again. She had always been respected, even feared, as the HOA president. Neighbors often obeyed her without question. Yet Tom had not only stood firm but had also revealed his son's authority as an FBI agent. That revelation burned in her thoughts. She felt embarrassed and powerless. Karen told herself she had to regain control. If she backed down now, the entire neighborhood would think she was weak. She believed she needed to act once more, and this time she had to prove she was right. By mid-morning, Tom and Mark were loading the last few boxes. The moving truck stood ready, its back door wide open. Neighbors walked by and waved, offering kind words and wishing Tom well. Some even clapped quietly, proud of him for standing strong against the endless pressure from Karen. Just as Tom lifted a chair, Karen appeared again. She walked briskly across the street, her clipboard under one arm and a folder of papers in her hand. Her steps were quick, and her eyes were sharp. "Tom," she called. "Before you go any further, I need to speak with you." Tom placed the chair gently in the truck and turned to face her. Mark stood beside him, silent but watchful. Karen held up the folder. "I have here a copy of the HOA guidelines. According to Section 12, no homeowner may alter, sell, or vacate property without informing the board in advance. You have ignored this rule. Until this matter is resolved, you cannot move." Tom shook his head calmly. "Karen, I respect that you have guidelines. But these are community rules, not legal requirements. I have fulfilled every legal step. The house is sold, the papers are signed, and the new family is ready to move in. I am not bound by your approval." Karen raised her voice. "If you refuse to comply, I will escalate this. I will not allow you to set a bad example for others. If everyone ignored the rules, there would be chaos." Mark stepped forward. His voice was calm but firm. "Ma'am, I already explained this yesterday. HOA rules are not laws. My father is within his rights to leave. If you continue to interfere, you risk legal consequences for harassment. You have already been warned by the officers." Karen's face turned red, but she did not back down. "You may scare others with your badge, but you do not scare me. This is my community, and I am responsible for order here." At that moment, two neighbors, Mr. Lee and Mrs. Harris, walked over. They had been watching quietly but could no longer stay silent. "Karen," Mr. Lee said gently, "we all appreciate the work you do for the neighborhood, but this has gone too far. Tom has done nothing wrong. He is moving to be closer to his family. You should wish him well, not block his path." Mrs. Harris nodded. "You have called the police twice already. This is not fair. We are tired of the tension. Let him leave in peace." Hearing this, Karen's expression wavered. For years she had relied on the silence of neighbors to support her authority. Now, seeing them speak against her, she felt her grip slipping. But instead of admitting defeat, she grew defensive. "You do not understand," she said sharply. "If we let one person ignore the rules, the entire system falls apart. I am protecting all of you." Mark spoke again, steady and clear. "Protecting people does not mean controlling their personal lives. Real protection means knowing the difference between what is right and what is simply convenient for your power. My father has followed the law. You are crossing boundaries." Karen looked from Tom to Mark, then to the small group of neighbors now gathering nearby. More people had come out of their houses, curious about the argument. Whispers filled the air. It was no longer just Tom standing against her. The entire street was watching, and many were quietly siding with him. Mark pulled out his identification once more and held it up. "I want everyone to understand clearly. My name is Mark, and I serve as a special agent with the FBI. I am not here in an official role, but I know the law well. My father is acting within his full rights. Any further attempt to stop him could be considered harassment, and harassment can have legal consequences. I hope we do not reach that point." The neighbors gasped softly. Many of them had heard rumors the day before, but now they saw the truth with their own eyes. Karen stepped back, her confidence shaken. She had thought Mark was bluffing, but now the reality stared her in the face. Tom remained kind, even in the tense moment. "Karen," he said gently, "I do not want conflict. I only want to leave peacefully. Please, let this end here." The silence stretched. Karen's hand gripped her clipboard tightly. Her pride battled with her reason. Finally, with her voice lower than before, she said, "If you leave, you do so without my approval. That is all I will say." She turned sharply and walked back to her house. The door closed behind her, and the curtains fell still. The neighbors turned to Tom and smiled warmly. Some clapped, others offered words of encouragement. The tension lifted as people realized the conflict was finally ending. Mark placed a hand on his father's shoulder. "It is finished. She may not admit it, but she knows she cannot stop you anymore." Tom smiled softly. "I am grateful, son. Not just for your help, but for the way you stood firm with calmness and respect. I could not have done this alone." Together they returned to the truck. The last pieces of furniture were loaded, and the house was ready to be locked for the final time. Tom took one last look at the home that had carried so many memories. He felt sadness but also a sense of release. The road ahead was open. Soon he would be with his daughter and grandson, ready to start a new chapter. Behind him, the neighborhood whispered about what had happened. For the first time, Karen's power had been openly challenged, and the balance of the community had shifted. But though Tom was ready to leave, he knew the story of Karen's resistance was not over. The final lesson was yet to be written. The morning of the move-out day finally arrived. The truck stood ready, filled with all of Tom's belongings. Only a few boxes remained in the living room, waiting to be placed inside before the long drive to his daughter's home. Tom walked through each room of the house slowly. He touched the empty walls, remembering the laughter of his children, the smell of warm bread from the kitchen, the quiet evenings in his chair near the window. Each memory felt alive, yet he knew it was time to let go. He smiled softly, comforted by the thought of joining his family and watching his grandson grow. Mark, steady and calm, carried the last box to the porch. He glanced across the street. Karen's curtains were closed, but both father and son knew she was still watching. For 3 days she had tried to block the move. She had called the police, raised her voice, and demanded her rules be followed. But every attempt had failed. The neighbors had seen it all. And something had changed in them too. For years, many of them had quietly accepted Karen's control because they did not want conflict. Now, after watching Tom's patience and Mark's clear words, they understood that they did not have to live under unnecessary pressure. Mrs. Harris walked over with a small basket of cookies. "Tom," she said kindly, "we will miss you, but we are happy for you. Thank you for showing us how to stand firm." Mr. Lee joined her, adding, "This street will not be the same without you, but your courage has opened our eyes. We should not have been silent for so long." Tom smiled warmly. "Thank you, my friends. I only wanted peace, but I am glad something good came out of this. Remember, kindness and respect are stronger than control." As they spoke, Karen's front door opened. She stepped out, not with the same sharp confidence as before, but with slower steps. She still held her clipboard, though her shoulders were less straight. The neighbors turned to look at her, waiting to see what she would do. Karen cleared her throat. Her voice was quieter than usual. I only wanted order. I thought I was protecting the community. But perhaps I pushed too hard. The neighbors exchanged glances. It was the first time they had heard Karen speak without command. Tom looked at her gently. Karen, rules can guide people, but rules should not control their lives. A home is more than walls and guidelines. It is freedom, family, and love. That is why I am leaving, not to break rules, but to live where I belong. Karen lowered her eyes. For the first time, she seemed unsure of herself. She whispered, maybe I forgot what truly matters. Mark stepped forward. His tone was steady but not harsh. Leadership is not about power. It is about service. If you truly want to protect this community, listen to your neighbors. Help them, do not rule them. The words carried weight. The crowd of neighbors nodded quietly. Karen felt their agreement like a wave pressing gently but firmly against her. She realized she had lost their blind obedience, but she also realized she had been given a chance to change. Karen sighed. I cannot undo the past, but I can try to do better. She looked at Tom. I am sorry for the trouble I caused. I hope your new life brings you joy. Tom's heart softened. He knew forgiveness was more powerful than anger. Thank you, Karen. I wish you peace too. With that, the last box was loaded into the truck. Tom locked the front door for the final time and handed the keys to the real estate agent waiting at the curb. The neighbors gathered around, clapping and cheering softly as Tom climbed into the passenger seat beside his son. The engine started. The truck rolled forward slowly, carrying Tom away from the house where he had spent so many years. He looked out the window one last time. The neighbors waved, smiling warmly. Even Karen stood on her lawn, her face thoughtful, her clipboard hanging loosely at her side. As the truck turned the corner, Tom leaned back in his seat. A feeling of relief washed over him, light as the morning breeze. He was free. Not only from the house, but from the weight of unnecessary control. Mark glanced at his father and smiled. It is over now. You can look forward, not back. Tom nodded. Yes, son. The road ahead feels brighter. Thank you for standing with me. I could not have faced it alone. Mark replied, you did most of the work, Dad. You stood calm, you stayed kind. That is what made the difference. People saw your strength and patience. Tom thought about the words and realized they were true. He had not fought with Karen. He had not shouted or argued. He had simply held firm to what was right. And in the end, the truth had spoken louder than authority. Hours later, when they arrived at his daughter's home, Tom was welcomed with open arms. His grandson ran to him, laughing with joy. The house was full of warmth, and Tom felt at once that he was exactly where he belonged. Meanwhile, back in the old neighborhood, life slowly returned to normal. But the memory of the events stayed with everyone. Neighbors began speaking more openly, sharing their thoughts in community meetings. Karen, though still president, listened more than she commanded. She found that when she treated people with respect, they respected her in return. She was learning, slowly but surely, that control was not the same as leadership. And so the story ended not with anger, but with growth. Tom gained peace and family. Karen gained humility and a chance to change. The neighbors gained courage to speak their voices. The lesson was simple yet powerful. True authority does not come from control. It comes from respect, kindness, and knowing when to step back. For Tom, the greatest reward was not just freedom from the old neighborhood, but the joy of knowing that even his quiet strength had planted seeds of change in the place he left behind. The road stretched ahead, filled with new memories waiting to be made. And in that moment, Tom knew the best chapters of his life were still to come.